tomorrow. I was walking in the woods today when the thought came to me that it has been 3 years since we sailed across the ocean on the Mayflower. When I let my mind wander, I miss England. The neighbor girls and I would braid each other's hair. Giles and I would play ball in the street. I didn't have nearly as many chores. After father went missing and mother died, the loneliness crept in. The church did a wonderful job at caring for me and my brother, but that did nothing to stave the empty feeling away. Being on the Mayflower was reminiscent of that feeling. The ocean spread out around us, and I was but a small being in the midst of it. I sailed across the ocean with nothing but my family and my mother's old chest. I filled the chest with my favorite dresses, petticoats, and keepsakes. I attempted mending the dresses just a month or 2 ago, but most of them did not fit or could not be mended further. When we first arrived, it was awful. My stepmother was with child when we boarded the Mayflower and gave birth at sea. She was incredibly ill when we reached land. I had to care for Oceanus, but when winter came, he died. The meeting house was filled with all of our sick. I gave soup to them and mended the blankets. So many died. I still remember them crying. The natives came and taught us how to plant and survive. My stepmother and I started keeping a garden, while my brother learned how to fish. We planted beans, squash, and corn. During that summer, a native man named Hobblemock and his daughter spent some time at our home. His daughter showed me around the forest, showing which berries and nuts I could pick. Giles learned how to hunt the slower animals, and my stepmother and I would cook them for dinner. There was a time when I thought my life might never be interesting, but then I discovered that there was a duel over me. Of course, there weren't many other girls to court. They were punished by having to stand in the stocks. Despite this, I was flattered. The Anne arrived recently, carrying with her some cows. Giles takes care of our cow, but I milk her in the morning. I do love mornings. It's quieter than it was back in England. The dew wets my stockings and I can feel the blades of grass through them. There wasn't much grass back home. The Anne also carried new passengers. There were some other children, but it was mostly adults. Nicholas Snow arrived and is staying with us. Single men cannot live alone, and the governor assigned him to us. He works as a carpenter and helped my stepmother by fixing a cupboard. My stepmother keeps teasing me about the way I look at him, but I believe she is lying. I'm much too busy to bother with boys. My stepmother just gave birth to little Caleb, and the neighborhood children do enjoy following me around. They tug at my petticoats and ask me all sorts of questions I don't have the answer to. Meanwhile, the older women sit, mend, and gossip. Maybe I can join them one day. I do hope that one day I can have my own home. I'd like it to be near the ocean. The breeze is pleasant. And then I might follow the actions of my stepmother and give my oldest daughter the job of caring for the children. Then they will only be around me when I'd like them to be. Very well. I do hope we meet again.
Good morrow, good wife. How do you fare? Thank you for coming to visit me with your dear daughters this fine summer's morning. I have to say it was good to see you and your family in the funeral procession for my husband Nicholas. I appreciated Reverend Treat's kind words as we stood beside his grave at the burying ground. One could hear the good man's powerful voice so clearly it must have reached all the way to Cape Cod Bay. I admit I have not been myself since. No motivation to knit or spin. For whom shall I do so? I've been drawn to the beach of late, not so much to fish or dig for clams, but to walk the shoreline and think back on my life here. My thoughts often turn to the spring of 1644. It seems like yesterday when Nicholas and I sailed from Plymouth to Nauset with 9 children in tow, landing on the same beach where my father, Stephen Hopkins, among others in the exploring party, first encountered the Nausets in 1620. We certainly received a better reception this time. Our leaders planned for us to arrive in time to plant wheat and rye, but there was so much more to do. The sachem we called George and his son, from whom we purchased the land, offered to build us shelters whilst our men began working on proper English-styled homes for us. Some of us chose to remain on board the boat while they worked. We soon set to farming and fishing, all 49 of us willing to replant ourselves on this spit of land. As before in Plymouth, we were assisted by native men and women who joined in with us to prepare the soil. The Nauset are accomplished farmers, so we relied on them to teach us how to plant in the Cape's sandy soil. With their help, we grew Indian corn, pumpkins, yellow squash, and delicious strawberries in their season. Even little Ruth learned to manage a bean plant or two, her favorite. She loved the way the tendrils would wind their way up the corn stalks. Nicholas would laugh at how few pods remained on the ground after she had her fill of the crunchy vegetables. 2 years later, in June 1646, Nauset became a township. Nicholas was elected clerk, Edward Bangs treasurer, and your husband, Elizabeth, cook, constable. The old Sagamore Mataquasan was an excellent neighbor and still is. The only discord I can ever recall occurred at times when our livestock wandered into his cornfield, and Nicholas got on so well with him. He would sometimes invite Nicholas to go drift whaling along shore with him and his sons. They seemed to know where and when these whales would come ashore. The Nauset prized the meat, blubber, and bone. Mataquasan would remark in good English, "The whales are a gift from Marshap, no need for mishoons or spears." I looked forward to these adventures. They meant sewing needles for me and the girls, and oil for our lamps. The sachem's daughter, they call Cousin Squaw, was a particular favorite. She made the most delicious sapachik, sometimes with duck meat or other times with turkey. I can still remember when we went out foraging once. We found a stand of wild grapes at the edge of the woods. Our aprons and fingers bore stains from the juice for the longest time. Do you remember the night the wolves, so large and fearsome here, attacked our sheep and killed many? The Nauset men temporarily abandoned their wills to track them down, for which they were handsomely paid. Oh, Bethiah, do you recall how we fed the lambs with rags we soaked in mother's milk? Many survived thanks to your skill. I'm feeling lost in many quarters today, and not just because my Nicholas is gone. I think back to when the Smalleys left for Rhode Island in the fall of '69. They sailed on to a far-off place called New Jersey. Shortly thereafter, the Higgins followed them there. No doubt they were looking for a new beginning where they could practice their Baptist religion. Anne and John Smalley were goodly neighbors, both in Plymouth and Nauset. Our John married their Mary, and those two youngsters sailed away with them on the tide. Nicholas and I were certain we had lost them for good. John Smalley and Richard Higgins went on to be important leaders in that new place. But not our John. He and Mary soon bid them all farewell, including Mary's twin brother Isaac, and returned to this Cape. He never speaks of it or gives a reason. Thank goodness all 9 of my children live nearby. My good brother Giles and eldest son Mark and his dear Jane recently accompanied me in the ox cart to watch the sunrise on Poachy Neck. It was a sparkling morning. Nicholas and I would often go there, where he would unburden himself of his many responsibilities in the community. I miss that special time together. It was a welcome adventure, an escape from daily toil. Giles understands my feelings. We both miss Father, his wonderful stories of the shipwreck on Bermuda and dreadful Jamestown, and especially his lusty laugh. Anne, you ask about my other son, Jabez, and his wife, Elizabeth. Dare I speak of her? Of all my children and grandchildren, I now have 72 with the birth of Ruth's Joseph in June. It is this daughter-in-law that vexes me most. She was nearly thrown in the stocks last evening for speaking against poor Daniel Coe. He was only the latest to feel the sting of her words. Even her own kin, Reverend Treat is the father of her son's wife, you know, are not spared. Alas, like Jabez of the Bible, birthing him was the longest and most painful trial of all 12. Now this. I pray each day that his Elizabeth will learn some patience with her fellows. What news of Metacom's war? Did I hear that Samuel Atkins and John Knowles were slain in the fighting? Such a loss of these brave men. I shall certainly send Ruth and Mary to their homes with some cornbread and my condolences. It has been a costly conflict. Oh, for the days when Massasoit and his people lived amongst us in peace. I am not so sure of this Governor Winslow. My Jane's father, Governor Prince, was kind, not cruel to the Indians as Winslow is. I wonder what he would say about the conflict. How we all miss him just now. My Mary says the war will not come here. Reverend Treat has told us that our Indian neighbors will not join Metacom after all. Nevertheless, it worries me greatly. Our Wampanoag are being squeezed out by the good governor, and others like him. Even here on the Cape, they sell their land to others, leaving less and less for themselves. I fear for their future now more and more. I believe I shall soon join my Nicholas. The wheat is ripening, yet my hearth is lacking good pottage and often cold. Before I say fare thee well, can I leave you with a song my mother taught me as a child in Hursley? The keeper did a-hunting go, and under his coat he carried a bow, all for to shoot at a merry little doe among the leaves so green. Oh, Jackie boy, sing ye well,
very well.
hey down, derry, derry down, among the leaves so green. Oh, to my hey down, down,
To my hoe down, down,
hey
hoe
down,
down,
derry, derry down, among the leaves so green. Oh,
the first doe
she did cross the plain, the keeper fetched her back again. Where she is now she may remain, among the leaves so green. Oh, Jackie boy,
Master,
sing ye
very
well,
well.
hey
Hoe
down,
down,
derry, derry down, among the leaves so green. Oh, to my hey down, down,
To my hoe down, down,
hey
hoe
down,
down,
derry, derry down, among the leaves so green. Oh,
The second doe she crossed the brook, the keeper fetched him back with his hook. Where she is now she shall remain,
among the leaves so green. Oh,
Jackie boy,
Master,
sing ye well,
very
hey
well.
down,
Oh, down, derry, derry down, among the leaves so green. Oh,
to my hay down, down,
to my hoe down, down,
hay down,
oh, down,
derry, derry down,
among the leaves so green. Oh.